We will fight you from the mountains, and we will fight you in the streets, and we will fight you in the valleys. You cannot take what isn't yours, and we will fight your goons and lawyers, and we will fight your Pinkertons, and we will fight your bought-off congressman. You cannot take what isn't yours. So and we will take you from your mansions, we'll burn your towers to the ground, and you will reap the whirlwind that you sow. You cannot take what isn't yours. So la da 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 Yes, we will fight you from our houses, and we will fight you in the streets, and we will fight you in the valley. You cannot take what isn't yours. No, you can't take what isn't yours.
Welcome to 2023. This show is dedicated to Kay and John. She's going through a tough challenge right now, and you just want to let them know that they're surrounded by a host of friends who will be with them at every turn.
From the mid to late 1960s, the Caretakers were one of the most popular local bands in the Inland Empire. They formed in 1965, with all the early members being students at Aquinas High School in San Bernardino. But by 1970, they had pretty much faded from the local music scene. During their tenure, they released 4 singles that received airplay on IE radio stations KFXM and KMEN. The band's career probably could not have gotten off the ground without the promotional skills of their manager, Andy Gray. In 1965, he was a senior at San Bernardino High School with a reputation as a go-getter, as a producer, director, and actor in the local entertainment scene. One of the band's earliest gigs attracting local coverage was a 4th of July 1965 appearance at the Paris Hill Park Bowl. In this San Bernardino Sun newspaper photo, the musicians were identified left to right as Manuel Balon, Richard Cabrera, Jim Eddy, David Muchachito, Tommy Corovedos, and Danny Muchachito. In this 10/30/1965 photo announcing their appearance at a San Bernardino haunted house, they were already wearing the black garb and top hats, which would become their early trademarks. The band was now made up of, left to right, Ron Cabrera, Richard Cabrera, Bill Fernandez, Donnie Muchachito, and Jim Eddy. They acquired a 1939 Buick hearse to transport their equipment from gig to gig. It earned them a mention in a November 1965 Place in the Sun newspaper column, where the columnist politely declined a ride because he said he wasn't ready yet to take that trip. In April 1966, This photo of the band and their hearse appeared in the Sun newspaper. The band members were now left to right standing: Bill Fernandez, Bob Helvey, and Ron Holcomb. Seated on top of the hearse were Jim Eddy and Richard Cabrera. In May 1966, the Caretakers visited San Bernardino radio station KFXM, naturally arriving in their hearse. This photo appeared in the 5/6/66 edition of the radio station's Tiger Mag. Occasionally, they would recruit a girl to be their go-go dancer. Trudy Johnson took the role in this Sun newspaper June 1966 photo. She is surrounded by caretakers Bill Fernandez, James Eddy, and John Holcomb. Not seen is new member Roger Barber. In mid-1966, Caretakers manager Andy Gray arranged for the band to make a unique appearance. On June 28, 1966, this ad ran in the Sun newspaper. It advertised that the Caretakers were to appear at the California Theater in San Bernardino. They were to play between screenings of the movies Monster Go Home and The Ghost and Mr. Chicken. On the day of the show, there was a short Sun newspaper article about the event. In it, James J. Pantos, the manager of the historic California Theater, said that this was the first time in many years that a live stage show and a movie had shared the venue. In a February 1967 Sun article, it was reported that Caretakers manager Andy Gray was beginning a series of dances for teens at the San Bernardino Municipal Auditorium. Naturally, the Caretakers were to be one of the featured bands. By this time, they had stopped wearing the top hats and capes. Standing in this photo are Bill Fernandez, John Holcomb, and James Eddy. Kneeling were new members Don Farrow and Jim Kane. The big news in an April 1967 KFXM Tiger Mag was that the Caretakers were going psychedelic. That is, in May, they were to become the first IE group to regularly feature a light show while performing. A story in a May 1967 Came Entertainer told of a May 12th out-of-sight Caretaker show at the San Bernardino Municipal Auditorium, complete with a light show. Manager Andy Gray reported that the band was returning to the venue on Friday, May 19th, and predicted it would be a complete sellout. In the Came Entertainer, it was announced that Scottish performer Donovan was scheduled to play the Swing Auditorium in San Bernardino on September 24, 1967. Scheduled to open for Donovan were groups The Chocolate Tunnel and the Caretakers. However, by the night of the concert, the rock bands scheduled to open for Donovan were removed from the bill. In an October 7, 1967 review of the concert, it was reported that Donovan requested that no rock-oriented groups precede him on stage. So, the Caretakers were out of a gig. A front-page story on the cover of the November 10, 1967 KFXM Tiger Mag told of the Caretakers opening for two name rock acts. They opened for the Electric Prunes November 11th at the Purple Haze Club in Riverside. Then they opened for Eric Burden and the Animals on November 17th at the Swing Auditorium in San Bernardino. They shared the bill with fellow IE bands Blues in a Bottle and The Good Feelin's. On December 19th, 1967, the Caretakers played at the Purple Haze Club in Riverside, opening for Irish band Them. By then, Them was minus lead singer Van Morrison, who had left in late 1966. The members of the Caretakers were, left to right, Bill Murray, Bill Fernandez, new member Bruce Robertson, Don Farrow, another new member Eric Fields, and holdover Jim Kane. To close out December 1967, the Caretakers made 2 more appearances at the Purple Haze, headlining over IE band The What For on the 29th and opening for LA's Sunshine Company on New Year's Eve. In part 2, as 1967 ends and 1968 begins, the Caretakers find themselves opening for more touring rock acts, and they release their first of 3 singles in that year.
Welcome, Jonathan. Miles away, but very, very close.
I have this sort of an OCD that says if it's started, I have to finish it at some point,
Right.
to get it out of the way before I can move on, and I'm not one of those people that can just go, oh, I can hear how that's going to be. So it's like, whether it's going to be good or bad, I can just kind of, okay, I'll pass that by. I'll let it go and move on to the next thing. So I had some of these things that I was working on this summer trying to finish up. We're sitting around since, 2 years, 3 years,
Sure.
and I was like, I started things and then I thought, oh, these are terrible, and then like a year later come back to it. It's like, oh, I could actually do something with that, and then start working on it. And then this summer when we were out in the countryside, I was like, I'm just going to finish all these songs. And there's about like 25 of these songs that are horrible. They're shitty songs.
After the drive-in closes and the people all go home, then the monsters can all come out in the privacy of their little lives. Yeah, they're outside shouting at everyone about some outdated morality. Meeting later in some dingy stall, hiding their activities. No, you don't get no rights, but you know I'll get my own. All the downtrodden will just suffer. Oh, no, you don't get no government loan. No minister who chokes in his tutu. At least he found what made him come. The others just suppress their demons and take it out on everyone. Which one? Oh, it's a lie. Who is true to themselves? Is that the way to be? Which one? Oh, it's a lie. Which one? Oh, it's a lie.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the Lo-Fi Lounge. Charlotte Muse and Patrick Daly, In Which I Forgive the River. That's by Charlotte Muse. Grief and Horses by Patrick Daly. 8 months you wore a black dress. You got 8 months out of the deal.
She got 8 months out of it, and we got all these stories. So I wanted to publicize them because no one's read them,
Well, it's a wonderful part of the book. It's a different part of the river, and you go over to the spot and you keep coming back to it. The one poem I was going to ask you to read from that, because it's very powerful, it's very somber. Digging at Night.
Digging at night. The Indians were working, digging a ditch day and night. And what do you think? Death was there too, working along with them, with her hair tied up. Ascension Solorzano. After the padre told them to dig a trench, they asked him how wide. But though he said it was for water, he measured himself head to toe and added 6 inches. And how long? Dig until I tell you to stop. And so they worked night and day on the trench. Back in the settlement, people groaned and vomited or lay naked with the pox while flies left eggs on their sores and the diggers dug the trench. They did not believe it was for water. The sounds of the shovel, that when blade hits earth, the thud of clods, they heard these in their dreams. When the woman first appeared, some said they had seen her among the houses, but no one knew her name. She would arrive each night with the rise of the Thule fog and the fall of dark. And how old was she? Who could tell, with her hair and her face wound with cloth? Out in the gloom filled with cricket whir and twig snaps, coyote howls, small creatures hiding from owls and the indifferent stars, she never spoke. The moon left her eyes alone. Those who saw her face said her eyes were slitted and her mouth wide open. She'd move her head slowly as a deaf person might, or lift it or whip it around like a spinning leaf, though you never felt a wind. It was said that she put her back into the work, spading deftly, flinging up soil, and now and then looking around her as if she were burying treasure. And then I just have at the end, in the year 1812 alone, 1,179 Indians died of cholera and smallpox at Mission San Juan Bautista. They were buried in their blankets without coffins in a mass grave. I use the term Indians because she did, and also because I think Native American is they weren't American. They were here long before this was America.
It goes back to that these poems are coming from something that's real. You know, I think sometimes in poetry, people imagine that poets are abstract or they just trying to conjure something. This is a received message from her to you, to the poem, and then back out again. The reality of the book started to settle the more poems that were triggered with her thoughts. It gives this gravity to the book that always brings you to the real. Again, the power of poetry to summarize and shine a light, to summarize and uplift.
To bear witness.
It's what I like a lot about your book is that it takes risks and that it goes from light to dark, and light to dark, and light to dark. I kind of like that final transformation in the title poem, in Grief and Horses, because there is a final transformation. Do you want to read that?
This is the title poem, Grief and Horses, and it's in memory of my dad. The horses on the other bank, waiting as ours cross the soaking, sucking meadow and clomp in the fast water too strong for our feet. Their rumps to us, their riders letting them graze, their haunches bunching as they shift their weight and easing, bunching and easing, like water over rock gathering and falling. The sun on bay, pink dappled, snowmelt spotted brown flanks that make you think of the ruddy cones of fallen pines. Rings that counted the years crumbled and spilt, softening into dust. How hard it is to write this beauty aright, that the earth with so little effort raises up, and with less, scarcely a shiver, sucks back when it falls. Every hold relaxes in time, and this means death to us. And the tearing effort of grief that is much like dying, like bursting through something that still resists. A great handsome horse, sure of its path, surging where we did not think a path could be made. Strong, cold, white as water falling.
It's just a fantastic ending to a challenging collection, right, Patrick? I mean, you take on so many different things, and when you were finishing that poem and you knew it was this final transformation that you're describing, how was that really difficult to work through? This has been a hard poem to weather, not necessarily write.
I think psychologists say that the more difficult your relation with a parent who dies, the harder it is to deal with, the death is to deal with. And both things are true. I love my father dearly, and he was in many ways not good for me. I'm sure I was in many ways, I know I was in many ways not good for him. So it was a struggle that wasn't resolved before he died. The last time we met wasn't good. And it took me a long time to even begin to deal with that. And I don't know, honestly, I don't think one can tell at that level of closeness to oneself, to one's heart, whether writing a poem helps or not. But I like the poem because I think it gets away from me and my dad. I think it does say what I know about grief. And someone asked me, or actually several people asked me, why I called the collection Grief and Horses. It's funny because more than one person who didn't know each other said, that title just reminded me of someone that I love who died, who loved horses. Two different people said that. But that's, I think my take on this as a title for the book is that horses are very powerful creatures. We can control them, and we have domesticated them, and yet they retain more than any other domesticated animal, perhaps, that sense of power and the sense of what we don't contain, we don't control. But on the other hand, horses can take us places where we can't go ourselves. This was on a trip, as you may be able to tell, and a horse trip into the Sierras. And we wouldn't have been, Charlotte and I would not have been able to walk there carrying our packs and our gear. But the horses could carry us. And I hope this doesn't seem glib, but I would like to think that poetry does that too. It takes you where you couldn't otherwise go. We have that when we read a poem that we love. I think there are two things that might happen either separately or even at the same time. One is that feeling of, oh yes, I knew that, but I didn't know I knew it. Or else perhaps just a sense of wonder of yes, but I never would have suspected that. That poem took me, people say that poem took me somewhere. And I think that's, as a poet, that's what you hope to do. What I am always grateful in other poems, other people's poems that I love is that it took me somewhere that I couldn't have gone myself.
Right. Well, it's a gift. That strong horse, that is a poem.
Please enjoy The Danger.
right, all right, all right.
I'd like to do this one in appreciation for you all being here. Well, I'm lucky for my fingers, got a lucky bed to sleep, lucky thoughts they linger, lucky as I leave. Sometimes I turn my mind to days before we broke into. Yeah, I'm lucky, I'm so lucky for the times I spent with you. Some call it destiny. They say we don't control our fate. Yeah, but me, I don't believe that stuff. I'm luckier that way. Sometimes I turn my mind to days before we broke into. So lucky for the times I spent with you. Now what more could I ask for? What more could I do? What more could I ask for? I owe so much to you. I'm still dreaming, lucky to have cried, even lucky for the bad luck, just lucky to have tried. Sometimes I turn my mind to days before we broke into. So lucky for the times I spent with you, for the times I spent with you.